Well, welcome back to the Finding Something Real podcast, friend. This is your host, Janell Wood, and I am very grateful that you are listening in. I have another young woman to introduce today, and I'm so excited because she is a friend of mine. We have known each other for a number of years, and she's actually been on this podcast before, although I can't remember if it was only on Patreon when we were doing that or if it was one of these episodes, but we'll find out in a minute. Her name is Ana. Ana, welcome to the Finding Something Real podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
Ana, okay, so last season, season 7, I know you were on with Haley at one point, but didn't you come on a different podcast episode at one point?
Yeah, we did a special one for your 5-year anniversary that I came on.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And then
Wow.
I
Okay.
did the Patreon episode with Haley.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. The 5-year one, did we have a guest on? I can't even remember.
I was a guest.
Yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful. Yes. We'll link that in the show notes, maybe. So, Ana, you and I go way back, although I can never remember. I know that we talked about it when you were on before, but you were in high school, weren't you, when we first started getting to know each other, because we had Ember, a Young Life kind of small group. Was that
yes,
when I started to get to know you a little bit?
And okay. You were one of the leaders. And
yes,
that's kind of how we got connected. Yeah. But I think we really got close after that ended. After I came back from college. So that's been cool.
Yeah. It's been really neat because I remember you vaguely from that time. You were really sweet and you'd come once in a while. And then COVID happened and you went away to college. And you actually went to the same college that my husband and I met at in grad school. You were at Northwest University. Shout out what's their mascot?
Eagles.
The Eagles. Yes. When you're in grad school and it's an evening program, you feel pretty far removed from all that. But that was the same campus.
And I was an undergrad. So.
Yeah.
But it was during COVID, so it wasn't the same.
Oh, man. Did I tell you we were down there the other day? This is a side note, but it was really cool. We were at Ben & Jerry's on the waterfront.
You did tell me about that.
And it was so cool. And it's open late. And it was one of our first dates 20-something years ago. And we were just down there this summer. And we got to go to Ben & Jerry's late at night, just like we did 20-something years ago. It was so cute. Anyway, so we met at Northwest. And then you were there 20-some years later. And, well, actually, let's not date ourselves, like 18 years later. And then I remember this about you, Ana. You were always liking all the posts that I would put out for Finding Something Real. And it just encouraged me so much back then. I don't know if I ever told you this, but you were like the one person that I remember would like stuff. And I thought, oh, that's so sweet. I don't know her very well, but it's so sweet that she's always liking that. And then I think if I remember, I did some Zoom calls where I was asking people for their input, young women, and I invited you to that. And I remember you coming to some of that stuff that we did, where we would do brainstorming things. And I just wanted to talk to young women who would give me some feedback. And you were one of them, and you always had these great ideas, and you were so sweet. And then 2 years ago now, the gal that I had been working with, Taura, forever, and shout out to Taura, who did an amazing job for 4 years as my virtual assistant. We still have not met in person, but
That's
she
insane.
Was, what's that?
That's insane.
I know.
You know her so well, but you've never met in person.
I know. I just love her. She'll come in person sometime, or I'll get to see her, but Lord willing. But anyway, when she left, we were looking for her replacement, and she was getting a full-time job, and you were like, hey, I'm interested. And then we started going for walks and talking, and I'd make smoothies, and we would just get to know each other more and more, and that was kind of great.
Yeah, no, I always look forward to our walks and our conversations. They're very life-giving.
I know. I've really enjoyed just especially over this past year and a half or so, really getting to know you and seeing the way that you've just evolved and matured as a young woman, and it's been really beautiful to behold. So before we talk more about that, maybe, do you want to share a little bit of your story?
Yeah, I shared a little bit in the last episode that I did, but that was a year ago, so I'll just do a quick little recap. But my name is Anna. I was born and raised here in Chelan. I graduated 2020, and I went to college at Northwest University in Kirkland. Got my undergrad. Wasn't really planning to move back home, but the semester before I graduated, my dad passed away, and I I knew my mom and my brother were really struggling, so that's one of the main reasons I decided to come back. And I wasn't planning to stay here honestly that long, but it's kind of been really a journey. But I'm still here. I'm still in Chelan, but I've grown to love it. I absolutely love the people here. I've just loved how God has taken probably the place that I hated the most, and He's really turned it to somewhere I love and I'm really flourishing, and that's something only God can do. And yeah, I love God. I really believe in this ministry, and that's why I've been trying to get as involved as I can, even if it's just with ideas and behind the scenes stuff. But I really believe in you as a friend and the mission that you're trying to do and accomplish through young women. So yeah, excited to be here.
Well, I just love you, and not just because you said all that, but that was really sweet. Tell me more about why you hated Chelan. And Chelan, just for those who aren't familiar, is in Washington State. So, and it's not by Seattle and it's not by Spokane. We're like right in the middle.
Right in the middle. Yes.
And still on the east side of the Cascades. So we get the drier weather. It's really pretty here. But yeah, so a lot of people come here. Why did you not want to be here?
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people love it here. Like a lot of people come here to vacation to enjoy the lake and the summer. But I think the reason I didn't want to come back was because I had a lot of bad memories associated to this place. Um, to kind of go back to what I was talking about with my dad, he had a stroke in 2018 that paralyzed the left side of his body and left him handicapped up until he passed away almost 4 years later. And so I think for most of my high school years and then up until I went to college, that was kind of my reality. And really everywhere that I would go, I had a bad memory associated to that place. And so if it was at my house or if it was at school, on my drives, everywhere that I would go, there was just some hurt or some tenderness that wasn't completely healed yet. So coming back, it was really scary for me, at least emotionally, because I was like, I don't want to face probably the place that has done the most damage up until that point. And there was also some family things, and a lot of my family members on both sides live here that I wish things were different or had different circumstances that were just not the case at the time. So it was just hard to see them and not be in the place that I would want to be with those relationships. So I think it was just a really tender time and a really those wounds are still pretty fresh and pretty open. So I think that was a big fear of me coming back.
Tell me about your growing up before you went to college.
Yeah, my growing up, it was pretty, I would say, pretty sweet. On my mom's side, I'm one of the older ones, and on my dad's side, I'm one of the younger ones. So with my dad's side, I really like all my cousins are like 10 years older than me and up. So that side of the family, I'm not super close with because obviously that age gap. Like I was just growing up, and they were like teenagers or working full-time jobs, so there wasn't a lot of relatability. But with my mom's side, I got to see all my cousins grow up, and yeah, I would just say it was really sweet. I really liked growing up in Chelan up until my dad got sick. But yeah, it was very very simple. We kind of just stuck to our routine. Like we would go to church on Sundays. I would actually go to church a lot because my parents were really involved in the church. So I would be at church Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. So pretty much like half the week. So I'm very much a kid, but I absolutely loved it. I fell in love with just being with God at a very young age. So I I absolutely loved it. And yeah, started to have a relationship with the Lord probably around 8 years old. So I've walked with Him pretty much my entire life, and it's just been really cool to see His faithfulness in every stage and in every area of my life. Um, yeah, I did when I was in school. I did soccer and softball, which I really enjoyed. One thing I will say that was hard living here is I couldn't really make solid friendships. It was really hard because I think from a very early age, even probably from having such a firm relationship with the Lord at such a young age, my convictions were really strong, even um, even just like when I was like in elementary, and so it was really hard to make godly friends because there was a lot of people my age that weren't following that lifestyle, and so I would say making friends was really difficult, or at least friendships that I was longing for. Um, I think it started to get better when I met you, actually, at Denver, because I was Bible study that I've been praying so long for. But yeah, I think those are some of the beauty of it, but also some of the challenges that came growing up here.
Mm. What was your relationship like with your parents, and especially your dad?
Yeah, my relationship with my parents, it's funny because I think my relationship with my parents is probably why my relationship with God was so strong. Um, so it was, I would say for both of them, they're very different, but I would say they were both very distant. Um, they um, had a lot of responsibilities and a lot of people that they had to take care of, not just in church, but also just um, in their families. So I never really felt like I had their full attention, either one of them, when I needed them. And so that's when God really came to life for me in a real way, where He would be the one that I would run to when I needed help or I needed just somebody to um, take refuge in. And I don't think, I think I said this in the last podcast, but I really don't think it was their intentions. I think they just did the best that they could with the tools that they had up until that point because they did a lot of growth and a lot of, like cycle breaking on their family too, and I really admire that. But I think one of the things that I didn't get from them was that emotional connection. Um, but all, like ironically enough, that was one of the gateways that got used to help me get closer to him. So
Mm. So up until your dad's stroke in 2018, you you guys had a solid relationship, but not a real close emotional relationship. Would that be fair to say?
um, I wouldn't say that necessarily. I think um, it was fine our relationship, but there was always there was not a lot of depth to it. Um, So, a big part of my story and uh, something I don't think I've shared is that when I was going to be born, my parents had me before they got married. And so, for the first 3 years of my life, my dad wasn't there. But I don't remember that. All I can remember is him being there. But I did feel that, you know, that connection just, it wasn't there. And I always felt like something was missing or something. I knew there was something there, you know. And then I
Mm.
think when I was a little bit older, my mom told me, and I was like, it kind of made sense why I felt so distant from him.
Mm.
And um, I didn't want to do this, but I think unknowingly or maybe unconsciously, I kind of pushed him away whenever he tried to make an effort. So I think in that way, I played a part in that. Um,
Mm.
so I think there was just always like we both wanted, to get closer, but there was just a lot of like hurt and um, just kind of vulnerability there for on both sides.
Mm. Tell me about when he had a stroke.
Um, so he had a stroke in 2018, and um, he was driving. It was a late night, and we were driving back from church. And my mom noticed that he was kind of swerving a little to the left into the other lane, and um, I think that's when I started to realize something was definitely wrong. And things kind of took a turn because at that point he lost complete control of his body, and the car um, was almost tipped over. Like it was so close to completely flipping around. Um, until my mom hit like the emergency brake, and somehow, honestly, by the mercy of God, we were able to get out of there. And
Mm.
the first, I think, I was definitely in a state of shock when that happened because I just couldn't believe that that was happening in the first place, but also just things just kept progressively getting worse. Um, I remember I knew it was going to be a process at that point. I just didn't realize how long it would be. Um, the first year that he was sick, he was he had a lot of complications, a lot of health complications. So we were in the hospital really, really often. He needed full time care, so um, he was in a nursing home. So that was also very hard. And but we were in the hospital constantly. Um, I think for that first year, I lived with a lot of anxiety because I just didn't know if he was going to make it or not. So because he was just always in a really vulnerable place, and so that first year felt like forever. Um, and then the second year was a little bit more steady, but even then, um, it just it was so long and just dreadful to walk through. Um, and then I just remember praying like, why why is he not getting healed? Like, because my perspective on all of this has always been um, because God had kept him up until this point. I fully believe that he was going to get healed, and he
Mm.
still had a plan and a purpose for his life. That was kind of the hope and the thing that I was holding on to. That like maybe it might take longer, but God is going to heal him and God is going to restore his life. Um, and so that was kind of my anchor. Um, and so then we hit year 3 and nothing was happening. If anything, probably at year 3 things started to get worse. Um, he was before his stroke. He was I would say on the taller end a little bit. Like a strong man, and a a couple months in, you could see that because he was getting fed by a tube. Uh, he lost a lot of weight, and he was just a vegetable. So I think that was also an aspect of it. Like you're slowly seeing him kind of, you know, get worse and worse, and um, not really seeing that get better. That was really hard. I think by year 3, I um, I kind of reached the point where just I didn't know. I think that's where I finally hit a point where I'm like, God, if you take him, that's okay. I just don't want to see him in this condition anymore. And I think that's when I think God started to prepare my heart a little bit for either if he gets healed, praise God, but if he doesn't get healed, um, he's going to be with you, and that's the best place he can be. And so that's
Mm.
by year 3 is when I I finally had that reality check where it's like it's okay either way. Um, and then um, a little bit. It was almost going to be about 4 years, but a couple months later he passed away. I was coming back for Thanksgiving, and um, I came back late that night, and the next day was Thanksgiving. So he passed away on Thanksgiving. Um, we got a call that he just passed away. As far as we're concerned, passed away in his sleep. Um, and I mean, honestly, that really gives me a lot of peace that he wasn't in pain or he wasn't suffering in the past. But still, it was really hard. It was really hard for me to make sense of how there was not a lot of. I felt like there was not a lot of purpose that came out of it. Um, um, because, like I said, I really did think he was going to get healed. Um, and I just when that happened, I think it all just kind of hit me at once, and I didn't I couldn't wrap my mind around how God was going to get purpose or glory out of this. Because it just felt like all of that was for nothing. Um, I can look back on that now and say that that's not the case, but I think when it first happened, it's really hard to not think all those thoughts. But yeah, I was still kind of going back to my relationship with my dad. Um, One thing that I would say that bothered me when my dad got sick. I was never really a daddy's girl. I don't think I would ever consider myself that. But I think when he got sick, um, I completely took my walls down, and um, that entire time that he was sick, I really do think that we bonded in a way that we never had um, when he was well and uh, prior to his stroke. And there was a day, probably a couple months in, when he had a stroke where usually my mom and my brother and I would go visit him together, but this day, I think I was taking the SATs, so I had to take the test and I was going to go visit him after. So I went to go visit him by myself after my mom and my brother had gone, and I found him crying. So I asked him what was wrong, and we had a whole kind of reconciliation moment where he just asked me for forgiveness, and he was just sorry for everything, how everything played out. And um, when I look back on that, like if it was all for that moment, I really do think it was worth it for me, because that healed a part of me that I honestly thought would never get healed, and a part of my heart that I was kind of okay with not letting anybody touch that, um, but God is good and He redeemed that, so I'm very thankful.
Wow. Thank you for sharing all that. And I don't think you've ever shared all of that story with me. I'm just sitting here blown away that you went through all of that. So after your dad got sick, he was lucid and you guys were able to have a relationship for some time before he was gone completely. Is that I just want to make sure I understand correctly.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. When did he get really bad?
Um, I think for the first year, he had a lot of really serious like health complications, where there was I can remember 3 times that first year that like the doctor sat us down and they fully told us that he wasn't going to make it through the night. And so that was really hard. I think the second year I got a lot of hope because there wasn't a lot of health complications, but I think his body was really worn out, and it just progressively started to get worse. I think I knew that it was getting bad, um, probably year 3. Um, I think he was just really tired, and um, you could just see it. I this that's a part of my story that I don't really talk about, because whenever I talk about my dad's story, I just say he was sick, but I don't go into too much details because I think if I go into too much details, I kind of go back to that moment. But he was really not in a good place. Even just by looking at him, um, he was like a vegetable. Um, he was in a wheelchair most of the time that I would see him, or on his bed. Um, and so just remembering kind of just like his appearance the last time that I saw him, it brings me a lot of joy and a lot of just comfort that the next time that I'll see him, he's going to be in his resurrected body, and he's no longer going to be in pain, and um, he's no longer going to have to suffer the way that he did those 4 years. Um, and I think that that's probably when I knew, like when he started getting um, really, um, yeah, just in a place that even if he did get better, he wouldn't get better, physically. That's when I knew. I'm like, God, if you have to take him down, that's okay. I trust you with your timing. Uh,
Mm.
whether you decide to leave him or if you decide to take him.
Mm. Tell me about your relationship with God and his people during that time.
With God, I think he's always just been a constant in my life. Um, no matter how hard that season was or any season in my life, really, he's always just been my rock and my anchor. So I really don't like my relationship with God. If anything, it's just gone deeper, and I would say more. Um, there's a depth and a beauty to it that I never thought would be possible, but it's because of those hardships. I can't say that for his people though. I think that that was a really hard reality check that it was a really hard pill to swallow. Going through that with my dad, because um, his people didn't show up for us in the way that I thought they should have, or honestly, even just reading the Bible, the way that God calls us to. So that was really disheartening to see how, um, especially because a lot of people that I would consider, um, at least family in Christ. Um, there's a lot of overlap with like my actual family and them going to church. So they were actually my family. They were part of my family and part of my family in Christ. And so it was really disheartening to see um, just some of their reactions to the situation, um, and just the lack of um, let's say the lack of showing up when we needed it the most is really hard to swallow, especially for some people that I expected it from. Um, the lack of um, just understanding from our perspective. I think they were really quick to accuse um, our decision and what we had to do to make our family, um, work for the time. That was really hard. So I think, yeah, it was just hard to see people's kind of true colors when it came to that in regards to just the way that they showed up for us because um, it was also a long process. So I gave them a lot of grace that first year because I'm like, okay, maybe they don't have time, or I would just make up a lot of excuses for them that first year. Um, but then the second year came and then they didn't show up the third, and that's when that was really um, that was really hard to come to that realization that um, they didn't show up in the way that um, I was expecting them to. But even um, I would say even just the bare minimum, they didn't even do that. So that was that was really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Just looking back, what would you have wished that people would have done for your family that they didn't do?
Honestly, just showing up. Um, I think, and I've heard a lot of people tell. and especially tell my mom this, where they would say that they didn't show up because either they didn't know what to say, or it's just like the heaviness of the situation. They just couldn't do it, and um, that's when people need you the most. It's in their darkest and lowest points, and I think that's what's actually kind of marked me a lot, is that I want to be that person for somebody else, because um, it really is not about. There's really no words you can say in those situations. There's really um, nothing that you can say that will make the situation better. But I can tell you from experience, nothing will show up. I mean, nothing is going to be more of an impact to that person than your presence. I think we really underestimate the power of just showing up and just sitting with them, or just holding them while they fall apart. Um, I really don't think it was that complicated. I really do think it was just showing up.
Mm. Wise words. Okay. Wow. So you've been through a lot and you're still following after Jesus. Why? Why do you think? I mean, a lot of people who have been through what you've been through would say, God, you could have stopped it. Why didn't you? Um, did you have those moments? And why do you still follow him?
Um, I don't think I ever quite had a moment where I was like, had my fist up at God. Um, I would wrestle with him all the time, though. I don't. I do think there's a healthy way to wrestle with God, and a lot of the times I was frustrated, where I was like, I just don't understand why this is happening. Why? Because things. There was a time where things progressively just kept getting worse, and I was just so exhausted. I just didn't understand. Um, I couldn't make sense of it, or why he was putting me through that. Um, but again, I think the difference was that I was going to him for those questions, and not just having that be where I turned my back on him. Um, I would be wrestling with um, those questions with him, and um, and even if I was at my angriest, or I was just so frustrated with him, after I was done, he would be the one to comfort me, and he would be the one that would just hold me. Kind of again going back to my childhood, where he's always been that. Whether it's been to run to tell him like all the positive things that are happening in my life, or the negatives, he's just always somewhere I can run and hide, and um, take refuge in. Um, and even during that season, he never stopped being that. If anything, that relationship deepened, and um, I think it became stronger because it wasn't um, based on their circumstances. It was because, one, I really loved him, but also I believed in the plan that he had, not only for my life, but even for my dad's, for my family's, and I know that he's outside of time and he can see the bigger picture. And I think one of the things that I wrestled with the most was um, probably believing that he had good plans for me, because, like I said, there was just a season where um, everything just kept getting worse. Um, but um, but he's faithful, and I've seen his faithfulness um, all throughout my life, and I've seen his grace and his mercies in the times when I know I didn't deserve it. Um, and I think with each day that I follow him, I just completely captivated by the way that he pursues us, even when we're not pursuing him. The way he loves us so deeply. The way he loves people that I think maybe us we wouldn't be attracted to, or just people, or people that are hurting us so messed up. Um, but I think with every day that I continue to follow the Lord, um, I think that's just the word that I keep coming back to. Is just I'm captivated by Him, and He captivated my soul at a very young age. I think He just kept pursuing me, and kept I think the more that I gaze at him, the more just in love I fall in love with him. So, um, yeah.
Well, it sounds like you're not going anywhere else,
Yeah.
which, I'm with you on that. um, I asked you to share some things in what you filled out here, and you did share some things that I thought were interesting. And you've kind of alluded to them here, or even said. You said that you have been hurt by Christian people, which you mentioned, people not showing up. You also said that someone who's had to deal with decisions past generations have made, and we'll talk about that here in a second. And then you also talked about wrestling with and disappointment with God, or maybe disappointment and wrestling with plans for your life, um, and taking them to God. You also said that you've had some pretty hard seasons of self-hatred, depression, and suicidal thoughts. Um, I'd love for you to share on each of those things, Anna, because I think other people can relate to that, and I'd love to hear more about that.
Um, I'm going to start backwards because that's the last thing that I remember you saying, just the self-hatred stuff. But yeah, I think that's a big part of my personal testimony. I think what I shared with my dad, it's a huge part of my story, but it's not, um, my personal story with the Lord. I think um, I gave my life to Christ when I was 8, and have really followed Him the best that I could up until now. But I think when I was probably around um, middle school age, um, probably 6th or 7th grade, I started to deal a lot of self-hatred. Um, and I think really intensely though. I think I've always had that because of what my mom shared with me. Because I remember even from a very young age, those lies from the enemy were so loud. Um, I looking back on it, I fully thought that was me, but looking back on it now, I can 100% say that was the enemy trying to get those lies in my head, and they really took root. Probably because I had so many um, like fresh soil for those to take root, but um, yeah, I think it got really really bad probably when I was around 13 or 14, where I just couldn't. It wasn't really comparing. I don't think I've ever really struggled with comparing myself. But I think it was just me. Like I really hated myself, and I can't really um, understand because I love the person that I was trying to be, but at the same time it was just an awkward, weird wrestle and tension where um, I knew I was on the road to becoming the person that I knew I wanted to be, but also just dealing with a lot of um, internal hate that I feel like it wasn't really my own looking back on it. But that's a big part of my story because I don't think I really believe what the Bible said about me that I was the daughter of a king or I was beautifully and wonderfully made. I didn't believe those things really. I think especially being the daughter of a king. Yeah, I think that um, being the daughter of a king, I didn't really believe that fully. And that was huge because that's where my identity should have been all along. And because it was misplaced, the enemy had full room to mess with that and tell me who I was. Um, and so um, it's been a long process, but I think um, God has been really, really gentle with where I've been at, um, and really patient with at reviewing and kind of making those scriptures come to life for me. And I can say now that I do believe that what the Bible says and who He says that I am. And it's crazy how believing that wholeheartedly, not just thinking it, that changes everything because it's not that like I'm like I like love myself like all like like the other extent. But I think it's just one, a lot of admiration for one, just getting this far, and um, I'm proud of myself for um, just surpassing all those trials that have come my way, but also just what confidence in who God has made me to be. And um, I think now I can see the plans and the purposes that He's placed on my life that were there even before I was born. I'm starting to tap into some of them, and it really does make me believe that um, wow, God knew I had to be born um, for such a time as this, and yeah, I am fearfully and wonderfully made, and um, and I believe that wholeheartedly, and I think that's true for everything.
Hmm. I love that. It was interesting you brought that up because I am writing a chapter for a book project, and I was working on it today, and it's about the difference that believing lies makes on our identity. And
Yeah.
when I was writing it today, I was thinking, man, like it's not just a lie that we think, because I remember having those lies too and believing them secretly and thinking it only was about me, and it's just like this, private thing. It's all about me. And really looking back on it, it wasn't just a lie about my identity. It really was a lie about his identity because I
Yeah.
didn't believe him. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't believe him. And it kind of goes back to that parable of the talents that Jesus talked about, when the three guys, two of them invest the money because they know their master's good. And then the third one buries the treasure because he knows his master is, a harsh man. And you can go back, that's my paraphrase, but you can go look at it in scripture. And it's all about him mischaracterizing his master. And that goes to what you're saying here, right? Like knowing who you are, but knowing who he is, that he's trustworthy and what he says about you is true. You just, for those who don't know, you just quoted scripture as you were talking about knowing who you are, that you're fearfully and wonderfully made. That's from Psalms, that you are chosen for such a time as this. That's in Esther, but also talked about in Ephesians, like there's a plan and a purpose over your life, and who you are because you know who your daddy is.
Yeah.
You know what he said about you. I just
Mm-hmm.
think that's so beautiful. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that, Anna. And now, I mean, obviously there's some incredible things that God's doing in your life. And I'd love for you to share about that briefly, although we didn't talk about the other things that you mentioned in here, and I don't want to lose track of that. So you also talked about generational things, and I'd love for you to share a little bit about that. And then we'll talk about the stuff that God's doing.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's been really cool to have you walk alongside me in this area that I'm going to be talking about. Because I really do think it's a battle that I couldn't um, fight on my own. I really do think um, it took everybody in my village, metaphorically speaking, but to fight this battle. But um, yeah, so there were a couple things that I started to notice um, in my mom's side of the family that um, became alarming around the time when my dad had a stroke. But it did have to do with a generational curse. And I don't know how familiar you guys are with generational curses, but it's just a pattern that continues generationally. So it just, no matter if it was your parents' generations or their parents' generation, it's the same pattern that carries on, um,
Mm.
and it gets passed down to your offspring. But there's a pattern that I noticed in my family, um, and ironically enough, it was strokes. Um, so to give the short version of it, my mom is one of 10 kids. She's the second oldest, and her family's from Mexico. So growing up listening to my mom's childhood stories, um, they became Christians around the time when I was probably 16ish. Um, but they grew up Catholic, and she would tell me stories about um, just how a lot of people's easy fix is just to go to either a palm reader or, a witch, or, there's a lot of witchcraft that was just the easy fix to everything. So obviously I knew that was bad because I grew up in the church, but I just didn't realize how it would still be affecting me now. But there was that correlation where, okay, there may have been some witchcraft or something involved on my mom's side of the family. But the pattern that I started to realize was that on my mom's siblings, their spouses were getting strokes, and kind of the freaky thing is that they were happening in order from birth order. So the first stroke that happened in my mom's side of the family was um, my aunt who married the um, oldest sibling, and then the second one was my dad who was married to the second oldest, which is my mom. And that pattern lingered, um, and the stroke that happened after my dad was another aunt, um, and hers was vital because she ended up passing away. Um, and so at that point, I was really frustrated because I I remember being at her funeral and just having so many emotions, but really just confused because I really didn't think that I should have been there. Um, I mean, she was in her 40s, and
Mm.
from what I thought, she looked really healthy, and so I just didn't understand how that happened or why it happened. Um, but I think it really sparked a flame in me that I just couldn't turn off. And I did a lot of digging on generational curses, how how they happen or how they get passed on. Um, but one thing I did notice was just the consistent pattern. Um, and that was back in 2019. So at the time, I was a junior in high school, which is kind of funny to look back on it now. Those were the things that I was um, thinking about at the time. But um,
Mm.
yeah, I went to college, and um, this was my first week of college, and um, I had to come back for the weekend because one of my aunts was getting married. Um, so I was like, finally somebody's getting married. Good is happening. Um, but during the ceremony, my grandpa had a stroke, and so that was kind of the tipping point where I was like, okay, this is getting out of control. And I was at that point I was mad because I was like, if this continues, this is really just gonna um, continue to get more people in my family, and until it gets all of us and it passes through my generation. I was like, that is not gonna happen. um, and so I kind of went on this journey with the Lord of um, trying to figure out what the steps were to get delivered from that. um, and yeah, that was in 2019, and it's been a very, very long journey. This was the third stroke I had experienced in 3 consecutive years. So I watched my dad had his stroke in 2018. I was there when my aunt had her stroke in 2019, and then I saw this one, and it was year after year. So it was
Oh
right
my
after the
word.
other, which it was that was insane. I think looking back on it now, I really can't believe that still happened and that I was there to witness all of them. But I think that was really um, my ticking point, or my just where I snapped, where I'm like, this cannot um, continue, or it's gonna continue to get more people in my family. And I was just I wasn't okay with that, and I'm like, it's not getting past me on. It's not getting any further than it has been up until this point. So
So
I think that just created like a boldness in me too, that I'm like, it's gone this far, but it ends with me. So yeah.
so do you mind if I ask you a question that maybe someone who is skeptical would be asking? And that would
Mm-hmm.
be like, how how did you know that there wasn't an I mean, I just don't even know how to ask this without sounding like a skeptic, but like, how did you know that there wasn't a physical reason for those things? Like maybe there was some sort of, like you were saying, you thought instantly it was a spiritual thing. A lot of people would look to the physical, like what's going on in this bloodline. Maybe there's hereditary markers for different things. Did you guys explore those too? And what made you so convinced that it was a spiritual thing?
Yeah. I was definitely skeptical of it two, I think the reason that I knew it was spiritual though is just because I had gone through kind of all the logical points, and even then it didn't add up. One of the first thoughts that I had was it's hereditary. But if I looked at the people that were having the strokes in the family, they were not related. So
Mm.
that was out of the picture. So they were all people that married into the family. So none of the siblings had gotten a stroke. It was all the spouses of the siblings. So that was the hereditary. Wait, hold on. Hereditary part.
Yeah.
Yes. That was out. And then when I looked at each case or each person, they all had very different outcomes. So um, the first person that had the stroke was one of my aunts, and with her, she she was in a coma for about 3 months, and was in very serious condition. But she did make a full recovery. She's still alive today, but she does have some repercussions from that stroke. She kind of walks with a little bit of a limp,
Mm.
and is not necessarily in her um, right mind most of the time. So there's definitely some effects that the stroke had. With my dad, um, I think with him, there, um, I I think out of everybody, he was probably the most likely to maybe have had a stroke. I got very educated on strokes because of
Mm.
how many my family had experienced. But um, sometimes it can be caused by stress, and at the time, my dad was pretty stressed out. So I mean, his was the one that made the most logical sense.
Mm.
Um, but when I looked at everybody else's, it just didn't really add up. Um, Sometimes it can be with age. But other times, um, sorry, um, um, but yeah, when I looked at my dad's, he was probably the most likely to have a stroke. So, um,
How old was your dad?
my dad, he's older. He's like in his 60s when he had
Mm.
the stroke. So he was a little bit older. But um, my two aunts were both in their 40s when they had their stroke, and then my grandpa was 80. And the funny thing about my grandpa is he made a full recovery, and he's 85 now. It's been 5 years since he had a stroke, and it doesn't look like he's going anywhere. So praise God. But um, yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons that I think the timing of it was one of the reasons where I knew it was spiritual, because let's say every stroke was, um, or that person was, prone to strokes. The timing of it could not be more,
Mm.
I think a coincidence, but it was definitely not a coincidence because it was 3 consecutive years. That's where I think I realized that I'm like, okay, no, this is more than just um, the physical part. I knew it was a spiritual because, and I think the fact that I got to witness all of them made me realize that um, this was not just something that happened like a misfortune. I'm like, one, sure. Two, maybe. But three, that's when I started to be like, okay, no, this is definitely spiritual. And then
Mm.
when the other one, like with my grandpa, I was like, okay, no, this just confirms all the kind of like speculation that I had up until that point. Um, and then I did a lot of digging just recently too, just to be a little bit more informed on um, some of the patterns. And the pattern that I like, the conclusion and the pattern of the curse was it affected, um, like I said, the siblings or the person's spouse. So this was on my grandma's side. It was on her bloodline, but funny enough, it didn't touch her. It touched her spouse.
Mm.
Um, so that makes sense on why it got my grandpa. And then when you look at their kids, it didn't. It was on their kids' bloodline, but it didn't touch the kids. It touched the spouses. Um, and so that was a correlation. And then I thought it was just up until my grandma's generation, but talking to my grandma because she's still alive. Um, she told me that she lost her dad when she was 6 years old. So that pattern continues. So it's like even a generation prior. So it's up until it got broken earlier this year. It hit um, my grandma's parents, my grandma, and her kids. So 3 generations.
Mm.
Um, and the pattern was consistent. And I think um, there was just a lot of I get people that are skeptic, but there was just so many signs that kind of just told me that like no, there's is definitely
Oh.
um it's a very there's just a lot, there's too much for me to look away, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your grandma's dad, did he die of stroke too then?
Um I think so. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I do remember that she grew up most of her life without her dad because she just was 6 years old.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Okay, so you said it got broken earlier this year. I know like we're running out of time here, but I know that we want to bring some people on to talk about this because it's I mean, even though I believe in the spiritual realm, like I think that I'm probably more skeptical of these kind of things
Mm-hmm.
than, we've talked about that before. Like I'm like, okay, how what is this? I'd love to talk to somebody who could come on and talk about the spiritual realm in a way
Yeah.
um, that's not too woo woo, but also is acknowledging there is some woo woo. Like
Yeah.
there's stuff we don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
This is an area I don't understand at all, especially like yeah, there's so much of this, and I know as we've talked in our own conversations, it's kind of like what you're figuring it out as you go along and just surrendering it to the Lord. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, would you briefly share what some of that broken stuff, how that happened, and where you're at now with it?
Yeah. Well, the whole story, it's very long, but I'll kind of give like the shorter version of it. Um, I did a lot of research on how that once I realized this was spiritual, I did a lot of research on how like what the Bible says about it first, and then how that actually gets broken off. Um, and I knew it was through deliverance.
Mm,
And so for people that are not familiar with deliverance, deliverance is just basically breaking off any legal rights that the enemy had up until that point, um, and just claiming the blood of Jesus over you in your life and any area that um, you know, he had dominion up until that point. And it really is just pleading the blood and repenting. And um, yeah, I think it's more simple than people make it out to be.
mm,
But I knew that's what we needed. I just didn't really know exactly what that would look like. Um, I also didn't know if I needed somebody to lead me through a deliverance or if I could just be delivered by myself. I didn't really know a lot about the topic, but this is really cool because he would be just a dream guest. But John Mark Comer's wife actually was a big part of my story. I got to hear a podcast where she told her story with a generational curse that was on her family. And it gave me a lot of hope and a lot of just reassurance that one, I wasn't crazy. Because up until that point, I hadn't heard of anybody really that had experienced a generational curse. Um, to the degree at least that I had experienced it. So one that really validated some of the things that I was seeing, but also gave me a lot of hope that there was a way to actually break it off.
mm,
And the way that she got delivered was somebody led her through a deliverance, and so I was really using her story as a guide for my story.
mm,
And so I started praying specifically for somebody that could lead me through a deliverance. So I at the time I didn't know anybody that does or did deliverance because that's not really talked about really like in the church. Um, I think it's kind of like tucked in a corner and talked about when you're just like really desperate or in really need. And I was in desperate need of it because I was like, if this picks up speed, there's just no, it's just gonna keep getting more people, and I was just not okay with that. So I started
mhm,
praying for somebody that could lead me through a deliverance. Um, start praying for a couple months, and funny enough, a guy in my small group had actually experienced had his own story with deliverance. not with the generational curse, but something personal with him and his body and healing. But he shared a little bit about his story and about his pastor that led him through the deliverance. And as he was talking, um, I was like, I need to meet with this pastor because I knew she was going to be the one that was going to lead me through my deliverance. So yeah, it was a long time coming, but I met with his pastor, and she led me through a deliverance. And I know for some people it can be kind of weird or crazy. I don't know what your experience with deliverance has been, but mine was really peaceful. Mine was very normal. I think going into it, I was also kind of scared. I'm like, what am I going to see, or what is this going to be weird? But no, I think even just walking into the room, there was just so much peace, and I knew the battle was already won. It was just officially, breaking off any legal tie that the enemy had up until that point.
Mm.
And so, yeah, what we did was um, we did a prayer for kind of repenting for me and also the sins of my family, because I was there as a representative. She just kind of explained that even though I wasn't the one to cause the curse, because I'm a representative on behalf of my family, I'm going to be the one asking for forgiveness on behalf of all of them. And so that we started off with that kind of going into God's throne room, asking for forgiveness, and then yeah, we just went ahead and we just broke off any legal curse that the enemy had. We were like specific on the patterns that I'd been seeing. So on the person's spouse, we broke the curses off, and then we replaced them with blessings for our family, which was really cool. And I'm really excited to see how that would play out in our lives. But yeah, we replaced them with blessing, and then afterwards we took communion, um, pleading the blood over our family and over our bloodline, and over the finished work that Jesus already paid for. And then she really, for the rest of it was really just a conversation. She was just kind of explaining what happened, used a lot of scripture to back it up. And that was pretty much it. Like it was a lot more simple than I thought it was going to be, but it's because it was kind of a 6-year process that God led me through, where I think the three big key things I would take from it that he was preparing me throughout the 6 years were: one, forgiveness. He really had to clean out my heart from any unforgiveness that I had. Um, and two, confession. I now confess sin regularly. And I think that those two have played a huge part of why my deliverance was so, in a way, easy. And then the third one that I really think that just ties it together is fasting. I started fasting almost a year in advance, ish, to and specifically, there was a lot of things that I was praying and fasting for, but that was the number one thing I would say. And what really made me stick to it, because fasting is so hard. I still do it, and I still think it's so hard. I just finished a 3-day fast, and it was probably one of the harder ones that I've done. But I think that was the thing that just kept me going. It's like, I will not stop until I see this broken off my family. And so it was I in a way easy, but I think it was God's kindness also in just preparing me all those years, and getting me ready for just the freedom that I would experience after.
Okay. So, first of all, thank you for sharing all of that. And I remember you sharing as you were kind of going through that process, some of it, and like you said, getting to walk with you and literally talk with you through some of as you were going through that process. I admit, like I grew up, kind of I used to say like a spiritual nut, right? Like charismatic when I was really little, in an Assembly of God church, went to a Lutheran school, which was like complete opposite. And
Yeah.
then, Free Methodist in my teenage years, non-denominational in college, back to the Assembly of God, back to
Yeah.
non-denominational, like all of
Yeah.
that, been to Baptist things. So I feel like I've had a pretty broad spectrum of, seeing faith expressions, within Christian orthodoxy, like
Yeah.
played out. And there are some people who are very strong Christians who are going to listen to a story like that and be like, that's going to be totally like blowing their mind. Like
Yeah.
they've never experienced anything like that. There's other people who maybe don't know the Lord or who are skeptical of Christianity in general who are going to be like, what? What is she talking
Yeah.
about?
Yeah.
And then there's some people who are sitting there going, oh my gosh, tell me more. Or maybe going, yeah, I've been through that. If you're in any of those camps, welcome to the party. Because I think that you can't hear something like that and not have some sort of reaction to it.
Yeah.
And there may be even some people who are sitting there going, that can be because of this, it might break some sort of paradigm or box that they already have in their mind. So if you're okay with it, and I think you are, but I'll double check here. And especially as we're wrapping up here, I would love to bring on some people to maybe talk about some different perspectives on deliverance ministry. Like you just mentioned one, John Mark Comer and his wife would be obviously a dream guest. And I know we've talked about that many times. But then also, maybe some other people who I remember watching Sean McDowell on his podcast. He had somebody who did exorcisms, and I was like, what? Like, it was
Yeah.
just like unbelievable. And he was a guy from like Princeton, very monotone. Um, I think you and I have even talked about this, and I was just like, what the heck is this? And even Lee Strobel just came out, who did A Case for Christ, journalist. He just came out with a book about the supernatural. I think it's something that people are interested in, and it's something that boggles the mind, especially somebody who's a materialist who doesn't believe in the supernatural at all,
Mm-hmm.
or somebody who's grown up in a faith expression where, we talk about the Holy Spirit, but we don't really talk about, you know what I mean? Like, so if it's okay with you, we'll kind of explore it maybe from a bunch of different angles. Are you okay with that?
Yeah. I would love to. I
Yeah.
love talking about this.
I feel like it would be really good and a really very apropos of the times that we're in. So let's do that, and then hopefully in some of those conversations you'll have some more opportunity to share your experience too, because I know that was a long journey for you, and I think it's amazing what God's doing there. Um, you also brought up a couple questions here. Why doesn't he always heal? And how do our prayers impact or intercede with our free will? Um, just briefly, would you mind sharing about both of those questions that you brought up?
Yeah. I think with my dad passing away, um, like I said, I can see now that there's been so much that has come out of it. Um, but I think at the time I was really confused on why um, God didn't heal him. I think there's a lot of questions that I was kind of wrestling with when he passed, but I think that was a really big one because really it took for him to be fully, gone for me to realize that like he wasn't getting healed because I believed it all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't tell me anything. I had full faith that he was going to get healed, and when he didn't, that I think that shattered a little part of my faith in because I knew he could. I knew he was able. Um, I just didn't understand why he chose not to, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the part of God a lot of people really wrestle with. That maybe people do believe that he has the healing power or he can, but he doesn't, step in
Mm-hmm.
when you feel like he should have or intervene. But I think I've just had to learn to trust his sovereignty
Mm-hmm.
and know that his plans are better and um, he has the best in mind for me. I think that's been something that I've had to relearn because I didn't really believe that at the time. Um, but yeah, and I think currently there's a lot of people in my life that are not completely healed yet, and they've been so faithful to follow the Lord, um, even in their pain and their suffering. And um, I think it just makes me kind of go back to that question and like, God, why can't you just heal them?
Mm-hmm.
um,
because I have seen, even though I didn't see my dad get healed, I've seen so many um, people get healed. Just recently, um, there was a girl that came in to our worship night, which we'll talk about in a minute. But she came in with her arms or her wrist bandaged because she couldn't. I don't think there was a lot of movement, or she needed healing, and she came up for prayer. And about a week or two ago, I found out that she was completely healed.
Mm.
And so, praise God, you know. And in those moments, it does make I rejoice with that person. But it's kind of like a bittersweet moment where, like, I'm celebrating with you, but then I just think of the times where he hasn't healed
Mm-hmm.
other people, or there's still people that are waiting for their healing. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just a tender topic
Yeah.
to me.
Well, yeah, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of different. We can talk about this more in further conversations, but I think there's some Christian rhetoric that isn't
Mm-hmm.
always helpful in these
Yeah, I
situations.
agree.
And one of them that I hear a lot is God's will is always to heal. It's
Mm-hmm.
always to physically heal somebody.
Yeah.
And I mean, all you have to do is look through the Gospels to see that that's not always the case. You know, I mean, John the Baptist was beheaded while Jesus was still on the earth.
Mm-hmm.
When there's a man born blind, the disciples say, "Who sinned? His parents? You know, what's the deal?" And Jesus says, this was allowed in his life to show the glory of God." And so, and I mean, suffering is all over Scripture. We all die,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, but like, yeah, he's he's able, you know, and so it's that hard reconciliation of like this. It's a tension, and we don't talk about the tension enough. I don't think. Maybe
Yeah.
I think that's a great conversation too. And then I think the prayer impacting or interceding with our free will. Just real briefly, because I'm getting a code saying that you are running out of storage, so I want to
Yes.
make sure
Yes.
that we we get through this. But tell me real quick about that.
um. Yeah. Kind of going off of um that question. Um. I I think from a very early age, um, I've had or wanted to have a really strong prayer life. And I think that's just been true. Again, all my life. I've tried, even if it was like a small prayer, um, for somebody that got hurt, like on the playground or something, I would always pray for them. Simple prayers, but I think my prayer life has really grown, especially this year, because I've needed God to come through in ways that are just beyond me. But um, I think one of the questions that I've had is, um, with that, how much do our prayers actually affect the the outcome of somebody? Because one of the prayers, sorry, one of the prayers that I've been praying for years now has been for some of my family members to be saved, and I've been, I think, faithful to keep praying for them, but I really haven't seen, with some of them, I really haven't seen the fruit of that. And I may never see it, and that's okay. Um, but I think it just makes me question, like, how much do my prayers actually um, are interceding on their behalf, you know?
Mm, yeah, that's a great question. Um, yeah, there's some conversation we can have about that too. A
Yeah.
robust conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, okay, just in the interest of your space and all the technical issues we've already had.
Yeah.
Okay, two couple final things. God is now you are like what's so sweet about this is I remember you being so quiet and like kind of sitting in the background and all these different things. And God's kind of moved you into a new place, into some different things. Tell me, tell me very briefly, in 1 minute or less, what God has been doing in this past year with you.
Yeah. Um, I think the one of the biggest things that he's been doing um, is he's grown my heart a lot for this valley, um, which is I think, really funny and ironic because there was a point where I really hated this valley. So it's kind of been like full circle moment where now I really do love it and I love the people here. But it's been really cool just to see God's faithfulness. But uh, last summer, one of my friends, Haley, who was on this podcast, she came back from YWAM, and she came back for those of you that don't know, YWAM is just a discipleship school. For 3 months it's school, and then for 3 months it's a mission trip. And she came back on fire for the Lord. And I got to hear all about her trip. And when she came back, we really started kind of dreaming and just sharing our thoughts for the Chelan Valley. God had placed a huge burden on her heart for the people here. She was ready to go out to wherever God called her, to the nations, to the world, but God called her back home, which that was honestly probably the last place she would have wanted to come back to. But she really started to grow in love for the people here, and God has been growing my heart for the people here for a couple years now. Honestly, since my dad got sick, because he was a pastor, and so I felt like when he had a stroke, the work that he began wasn't quite finished, and in kind of a weird way, I kind of feel like I took on that mantle, and he's just been growing my heart so much for the people here, and so we kind of came up with it was really a dream because honestly, I don't like where it's at now. I would never have thought that it would become this, but we thought it would be the coolest thing if we got all the churches in the area to come together for corporate worship, and because one of the things that I could not wrap my mind around is that how are we just going to the grocery store or just seeing these people that are also believers and not interacting with them or just waiting until we get to heaven to worship with them or just be with them. Like that can start now. And so we the more that we kept talking about it, the more that it just became like a burden where we had to act and we had to do something. And so at the time, our friend Blake was back from college and he decided to stay in Chelan. So he leads worship, and so we brought the idea to him and he was on board to lead the worship nights. And so seeing where we started, it was really just an idea to where it is now. We've had two, and we have an upcoming one in October, this next month. But just seeing the way that God has moved in these worship nights and just made his body, his bride, really come alive, has just been so. I'm just, every time that I'm standing there, I can't help but just like fall on my knees, and I'm just like, I don't know why you chose me or why you've put me in the position that you've placed me, but I'm just, I'm so honored. I'm so humbled that I'm even here. But I think he wants to do and he wants to accomplish something that's much greater than even anybody in this valley is really ready for. But I think he's wanting to do something that's greater than we can imagine. But I'm just here, just trying to be obedient to the next step, and it's been really, really fun to not get to do this on my own. I really get to do it with people that I love, and it's been really cool to see how the valley's been coming together. And it's not just individual churches that like, oh, this is my church, but it's like, this is God's church, capital C church, and we're brothers and sisters in Christ. And it's been really cool to see some of the gifts of the Spirit kind of come to life in those people. And the fact that I just have a front row seat to watch that, it's been really cool to see.
That's awesome. Anna, what do you hope to get from this podcasting journey?
I think what I would hope to come from this podcast is giving people a sense of hope. Kind of funny enough, I always choose a word at the beginning of the year to kind of focus on and see what God shows me in that year. And last year, my word was hope. And it's not a word that I chose. It was really more God chose it for me.
Mm.
And at the beginning, I was kind of mad because I didn't like the word. I thought it was very cliche and very kind of like, I don't know, basic. But there was so much that God showed me.
Mm. Awesome. Well, Anna, I'm so glad you're here. This is going to be really fun. And thank you. Thank you for being here. And thank you for your faithfulness. You're just a gem of a person. And I'm so grateful that God brought you into my life. Until next time,